was born in 1916, and my name, Beulah Vandall. I don't know where my middle name came from. It always puzzled me. I thought it was a peculiar name, but my mom really liked the name, Dieta. And for many years, after I got to realizing there was a lot of people that didn't like my name, for a little while, I didn't like my first name either. It seemed like people avoided calling me by that name, Beulah. But then after I discovered in the scripture, in the 62nd chapter of Isaiah, what that name meant, it made me feel better about myself and helped me to realize that there was something important in that, and helped me to realize as a child too that I must have been born a special person for a special reason. And I didn't know what, but I've been in search all these years trying to find out just what my part was in playing in this part of God's history. I was born up in a little hollow up above Elton, West Virginia, called it Fisher Creek Holler. Not many people lived up there. There was my grandparents on my father's side, and my Aunt Sally, my dad's sister, and her husband Jim, and they had a house full of children. And we lived along there, and there was about 3 other families lived up that hollow. And there was a little one-room schoolhouse that the children from those neighbors went to there. And my first year of going to school was at that little one-room schoolhouse. And it was right beside of a creek. And when a storm would come and the water would rush down through there, I would sit in that schoolroom and worry that how I would get across that creek and get home when school was out. And my dad always assured me that wherever he was when school was out, that I did not need to be afraid about the creek getting high and I couldn't get across that little footbridge. It was just a narrow little footbridge crossing that creek to get home. That he would always be there. And I can remember the first time that happened after I started school in the fall, and the storm came up and it thundered and lightened, and I could hear the water roaring over those big rocks in that creek. And when we got to the schoolhouse door, the teacher was letting us out. There my dad was on his horse, waiting. Put me up on the horse with him and took me across the creek and took me home. That really did something for me as a child. I could always trust my dad. That wherever I was, if there was any trouble brewing, he would always be there. Because some mysterious way he knew what was happening, and I couldn't understand as a child how he understood what was happening, and that I needed that kind of security. But in the middle of that school year, my teacher was a man teacher, and he taught in that one-room schoolhouse. I don't remember exactly how many children were there. He taught from the first grade. We didn't have kindergarten then. From the first grade through the 8th grade there, in that one-room schoolhouse. In the middle of the year, he got arrested. We didn't have school the rest of that year. He got arrested for making moonshine and selling it back in the mountain there. And he didn't get to teach school anymore. And so I didn't get to finish school in that one little room schoolhouse that year. That meant, because then we did not start school until we were 7, age 7. And that meant that was going to set me back. And when I had to start first grade over again when I was 8 years old. But right after that, early in the spring, I believe it was, as near as I can remember, my sister's husband got drowned in New River. And we had to go and bring her home with us. But when he got drowned, I remember the message came to my mom and dad in the night. Someone knocked on the window where we were sleeping in the bedroom and called out to my dad and said, "I need to give you a message. Your daughter says that you need to come up to Long Bottom where they lived," and that was somewhere up near Hinton, West Virginia. And it was across on the other side of New River. Your son-in-law was drowned today up there in the river. And my sister was expecting her first child in a few days. And so Mom and Dad got up, got dressed, and whoever this was that knocked on the window told them that he would, he brought an extra horse, and he would take them down to Sandstone so they could catch the train and go up there. They'd flag the train down, and they could go up there and be with my sister. And so they took me over to Aunt Sally's and my younger sister, Bernie, over to Aunt Sally's to stay with her, and they went on those horses down to Sandstone and got on the train and went up there and went to my sister's. And in a few days, the next time I saw my mother and dad, I didn't see my mother, I saw my dad, was at the cemetery at Green Sulphur. My Aunt Sally had made me and Bernie a new dress. Mine was pink and hers was light blue organdy. I can see those dresses yet with the little ruffles down on the bottom of those dresses to go to that funeral. And when we got down there to the cemetery, the first thing I saw, and it has stuck in my mind, it never has left me, that I saw my dad. The casket was sitting on the ground beside the opening where he would be buried, and my dad was on his knees at the head of the casket, just weeping his heart out. And being a small child, it really upset me because I never saw my dad cry like that before. And I didn't know how to handle that. My Aunt Sally, see, my mother didn't come down to the funeral because she stayed with my sister. She was expecting the baby any day. And they didn't come to the funeral, and my dad was there alone with a casket and just a few friends there to get him buried. And I had a hard time come to realize that Otto, my sister's husband, was really gone. Because I really liked him, and he always petted me, and I had a $5 gold piece that he had given me with a little chain on it that I wore around my neck. And he used to come and get me and carry me on his back and take me to his and Jesse's house and let me stay all night, and it was just like he was such a friend to me. I had a hard time handling that. And then after Otto was buried, my dad took me and my sister with him on the train back from Green Sulphur up to Long Bottom, where my mother and Jesse was. And in a few days, they had to call the doctor because the baby was going to be born. And that doctor there was there all night long. And because she was in grief, and I don't know exactly what all it was, but they thought my sister was going to die and then lose the baby. And they couldn't get her out of there at that time of night across the river on the ferry